2016. It was a Friday.
Yep.
You do, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have plans for that weekend?
Yes.
What were you going to do?
Fishing trip down in Racine.
Who was going?
Me and George and Mike, the owner of the boat.
Now, did you call the defendant George?
No,
What did you call him?
I called him Steve.
Did he have other nicknames?
Big Country.
When you knew him out east, did you know him as Steve?
Steve, yes.
Did you sometimes go out to taverns with the defendant?
Occasionally.
Did you ever go to Richard Cranium's with him?
Once or twice, yes.
Now, you said this boating trip down in Racine. Who all was going?
Me, Steve, and Mike, the captain, and Jimmy, the mate.
Do you know Mike's full name?
Mike Hankey.
Who owned the boat?
Mike.
And what would you guys fish for?
Salmon.
Did you go out on Lake Michigan?
Yes.
The night before, do you recall about what time you went to bed?
About 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Do you remember what time you got up the next morning?
It was about 7 o'clock.
7 a.m.?
Yep.
What'd you do in the morning?
Let the dogs out.
How many dogs do you have?
2.
Do you stay up?
Yes.
What were you going to do that morning?
Build a herb garden for my wife.
Oh, on your property?
Yes.
What kind of herbs?
Whatever she plants.
Sounds like a good plan. Is she a good cook?
Yep.
So this was a garden in addition to a garden you already had, or separate?
Separate.
So this would now be the day after Friday the 20th. This would now be May 21st, 2016?
Yep.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Did you see the defendant in that morning?
Yes.
What time?
Probably about noon, somewhere around there.
So that's the first you saw him was around noon?
Yep.
Do you remember what time you left for the trip?
We probably headed down probably around 1:30, 2 o'clock.
In the afternoon?
Yes.
Did Linda go?
No.
Take you how long to get down to Racine?
2.5 hours.
Did you go fishing that day?
Yes.
Who all was on the boat?
Me, Steve, Mike, and Jimmy.
And again, Steve, you mean the defendant?
Yes.
What size boat is this?
It's a 30-foot Sea Ray.
Is that a specific boat designed for fishing?
Pretty much.
Does it have like those seats that are fishing seats, or is it more a boat?
More of a wide open back.
And how wide is the boat approximately?
About 10 feet wide.
So boat that size, what's the area where the occupants would be roughly?
About 10 by 15.
Kind of close quarters?
Yes.
Now, you see the defendant here today. Is that the hairstyle he had back in May of 2016?
No.
How would you describe his hair?
Shaved.
Do you recall the defendant wearing a hat on May 21st, that Saturday?
No.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk at the same time you are. If you just want to give me a moment to finish the question, I don't want to talk over you. So his hair was shaved pretty close to the scalp at that point in time?
Yes.
In the morning hours, before you left for Racine, did the defendant share any stories from the night before? Also?
Yes.
And did you drive the defendant back to your home then at the conclusion on Sunday?
On Sunday, yes.
Did you have good luck on Sunday also?
Yes, we did.
On the drive back to your home, did the defendant bring up any unusual topics or indicate anything unusual taking place on May 20th or May 21st before you went fishing?
No.
Did there come a time following your fishing trip that you became aware of any news reports with respect to the homicide that had taken place in the Hoffman Road area?
I'm on Channel 11 News.
You remember watching the news on TV, it was?
Yes.
Was anyone with you when you observed this?
A couple times Linda and also Steve.
You do remember the defendant being present in the room when the report came on?
Yes.
Did you happen to recall, was he there more than once when news was reported on this subject?
It was at least once or twice, yes.
And did the news reports, without going into it, did they go into some of the detail of to what had been learned at that point with respect to the homicide?
Yes.
Where would you have been watching this?
What do you mean?
Where were you, at your home?
Oh, yes.
What room?
In the living room.
Okay. And do you recall remarking when you learned about this murder, anything about the case itself?
Yes.
What did you say?
I said the scumbag that did it ought to be taken down.
Did the defendant have any response to that comment?
Not at all.
Did you notice his attention or his demeanor when these reports would come on?
He was pretty intensely looking at the TV.
On May 21st, at any point in time, either before you left your house, in the car, or on the boat with the defendant, did you notice any injuries to his head?
No.
Did you have a good view of his head during that time period?
Yes.
You didn't see any bruising,
No.
no swelling,
No.
no abrasions,
No.
no contusions?
No.
And he had no hat on for that time period you were on the boat?
No hat.
On June 8th, 2016, did you learn that your vehicle had been involved in a hit and run?
Yes.
Did you then learn also at that time period that it had been suffered fire damage?
Yes.
And when I say your vehicle, I'm referring to the red Blazer that you spoke of earlier, not the car you or your wife drove. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did the police come to your home?
Yes.
Is that how you first became aware of it?
Yes.
Following it, did you go view your vehicle once you made this discovery? Did you go take a look at the vehicle?
Yes.
And did you then observe any damage to the vehicle aside from fire damage?
Yes.
Where was that mainly?
The right front corner.
And did you see if in fact there was fire damage?
Yes.
And where did that appear to be?
Front seat.
Was it in the trunk? Was it in the engine area?
No. In the passenger compartment.
On June 8, 2016, the defendant was still living with you, is that correct?
Yes.
And he had his own bedroom, is that right?
Yes.
Did you allow him to bring women home? Did you have any rules against it?
No.
So that was a leave for good or just leave for a short time period?
For good.
Did you purchase anything for him at this point in time?
We purchased him a bus ticket to go back to Virginia.
On September 7th of 2016, is it correct you met with Brown County Sheriff's Department
Correct.
individuals? You gave them statements, is that correct?
Correct.
You gave them access to your phone?
Yes.
In fact, you made them aware of this photo, is that correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, the fishing trip photo?
Yep.
I don't have any further questions, thank you.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jackson, thank you. May I step down? You want him excused?
Yes, we'd ask him to be excused, please. Thank you, sir.
Jackson is excused. Your next witness. Whenever you're ready. Whenever you're ready. Oh. Oh.
Thank you. Are you able to get that to work?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Are you just getting over a cold?
Yes, I am.
You need to refresh yourself, feel free. And I'm going to ask you, how old are you?
Really? 57.
I won't ask any other personal questions. Do you know an Ed Jackson?
Yes, I do.
How long have you known him?
About 8 years,
And have you been together for some time?
6 years plus.
Did you marry him?
Yes, I did.
And when was that?
August 13th of 16.
And do you live in the Green Bay area?
Yes. We never talked about it, but he's an adult, so.
Okay. So
It was
there's no,
okay.
there's no rule against it,
No.
is that correct?
No.
In fact, did you ever see him with any women?
Yeah, he had a girl that he's spent a lot of time with, and her name was Jordan.
Now, did the defendant arrive in town with a working phone,
Yes,
a phone that was working?
yes.
On May 20th of 2016, is there anything you did with respect to him and having access to phones?
Yes, his phone, he told me his ex-wife was gonna cancel their plan, so he would not have a phone. And he was going to get, one from Walmart, but they don't work in the house very well, because we've had other people that have had that happen. So I took him to Cellcom, and that afternoon, or about 5 o'clock, I got him a phone on my plan.
So you got an additional phone
Yes.
for your plan?
Yes.
It wasn't a phone you had sitting around the house already?
No,
Okay. And you literally put him on your plan, is that correct?
yes.
And who made the payments for that?
I made him, but he was going to pay me when he got paid.
Okay. And he did work from time to time while he lived with you, did he not?
Yes,
Did he get behind in the payments for the phone?
yes,
Did he get behind in payments for the rent?
yes. Ed had mentioned that.
He continued to live in the bedroom, though, is that correct?
Yeah,
And he continued to use the blazer, is that right?
yep.
Are you aware of any certain bars or taverns that he frequented?
I know one of the main ones was Richard Cranium's.
Were you ever there with him?
We went there the weekend that we were celebrating Ed's birthday. On a Saturday night, he met us at another bar, Mikey's, and then we ended up at Richard Cranium's.
It was going to be said sooner or later. So you went there at least one occasion with him, is that correct?
Yes,
Do you remember a fishing trip that your husband and the defendant took to Racine in May of 2016?
yes,
You didn't go with them, is that correct?
no.
Do you remember if you saw them in the morning before they left?
Well, I know I saw Ed and I think I went to work that day.
Okay.
I'm not really sure, but I know I wasn't home.
Do you-
But he always calls me and tells me he's going fishing.
Is that one of his favorite hobbies?
Absolutely.
Do you remember, were you working at all in your garden that morning, or do you remember the hours you went to work?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I know that I got a picture from Ed because he finished my herb garden that day. The base. He put an herb garden together for me.
Oh, he sent you a picture of it?
Yes.
That's nice. Were you aware what time he took off, and if you weren't there, that's fine?
No.
Was the plan that he was going to be gone, leave Saturday, get back Sunday?
Yes.
Okay, and is that in fact what took place?
Yeah.
And the defendant was going with them, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you know the gentleman with whom they were going to go fishing with?
Yes.
And that's who?
Mike Hankey, A1 Charters.
You've met him before, is that?
Oh, yes. He's been a long-time family friend.
You're friends with his wife also?
Absolutely.
Now, back in May of 2016, how would you describe the defendant's hairstyle?
Short. I wouldn't say, his head was never shaven, but it was very, very short.
Very different than it is today, is that correct?
Yes.
Following their fishing trip, did they return to your house on Sunday?
Yeah,
Did you see both of them?
I believe so.
Did you notice anything unusual about the defendant's head when you saw him after the fishing trip?
No.
Notice any injuries to his head?
No. With his fish that he caught.
I'm going to show you what's been marked Exhibit 113. Do you recognize, in fact, that photo?
Yes, I do. That was one that Ed had sent me that day.
So on May 21st, on this Racine fishing trip, that's a photo that was sent to you by your husband, Ed?
Yes.
And who's shown in that photo?
George.
Okay, the defendant's shown,
Yes.
and he's got a nice-sized fish, is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you usually get bigger ones?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Sorry.
I have a lot to learn about fishing. So with respect to that, the hairstyle that he's shown in that photo, is that about how you recall in May of 2016?
Yes,
With respect to the steps that you have taken,
yes,
you find it to be generally accurate to not show steps when you're not moving?
no.
It's not accurate?
Oh, yeah, it is accurate, yeah.
Okay. So in all, overall, it's generally accurate for your activity, is that correct? Or your not activity?
Both, I mean,
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Jackson.
morning.
Just a few more questions for you. When when George, or Steve as you know him, got here from Virginia, did he have a job lined up?
No, but only took him 2 days to get one.
Okay, so he got a job within the first 2 days of being
Yes.
here? What was that job?
He worked at Blackstone as a manager and cook,
Okay.
assistant manager and cook.
And did he start working there
Yes.
essentially the day he got the job?
Yep,
He worked long hours?
a lot, yes,
They essentially worked him like a dog?
absolutely,
And you were able to observe that, seeing how you were living with them?
yes,
And you and Ed kind of encouraged him or counseled him to maybe find a different opportunity?
exactly,
Okay, so you helped him make the decision to leave Blackstone?
yep,
Okay. And after he left Blackstone, he got another job doing landscaping, is that correct?
yes, at NEW Landscaping,
Okay. And he worked there regularly,
yeah,
every day?
yeah,
Okay. And are you aware, NEW Landscaping, what kind of work Steve was doing during the days?
yeah, they would haul dirt and do landscaping.
Okay. So,
We really never talked about what he did, but I do know that that's what they do there, so,
okay. Now, I think you said on May 20th that Ed was working on your herb garden,
yes.
and you knew that 'cause-
Objection, I don't think that's the testimony, May 20th.
No, not the 20th,
Wait,
but the
hold on.
21st.
Linda, just hold on for a second. The question was what day, May 20th?
I could have misspoke. I can just ask Ms. Jackson.
Why don't rewind and ask the question again?
Which day was it that you remember Ed working on your herb garden?
I know he worked on the 21st, because he sent me a picture. But I do know that Steve, George, and I worked on it another day as well, because we had to take out the old herb garden to put the new one in. So it was not just done that day.
So it's, okay. And so you said Steve had helped you with that project?
Mm-hmm.
He helped you with all sorts of projects, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes,
And you believe it was that May 21st that Steve and Ed ended up going on that fishing trip?
yes,
And you recall that because they were sending you photos of the fish they were catching?
yes,
And that was the same day that earlier in the day, Ed had sent you the photo of the herb garden?
yes.
Now, back in 2016, do you remember meeting with law enforcement about this matter?
I think it was September of 2016,
You went to the Brown County Sheriff's Office and spoke with law enforcement?
yes,
They specifically told you why they were talking to you?
yes,
And that was they were investigating Mr. Burch's role in I guess, a death. Did they tell you
yeah,
that?
yes,
And they essentially were just asking you about anything and everything you may know or may not know about that.
yes,
And they were asking you questions about specific dates,
yes,
specific vehicles,
yep,
and also just kind of general background stuff about his job and how you knew him.
yes,
And when they were asking you about dates, you used your phone, calendar, and text messages to kind of piece things together.
yes,
And when you were discussing the fishing trip with them, when you were trying to figure out that time, you actually used your phone to find those photographs, find those texts, so you could tell him what had happened.
yeah,
So when you were meeting with law enforcement, you were looking at your phone, looking at those photographs. Oh, let me rephrase that question. You can just ignore everything I just said. That photograph that we just talked about and gave to the jury, that was one of those photographs that was sent to you.
Yes,
And you were looking at it on your phone when you were meeting with law enforcement.
yes,
And law enforcement was asking you if there was anything unusual that you could think of regarding that time frame.
yes,
And again, you had that photo in front of you,
yes,
and you knew they were looking into George's role, or suspicion of his role in this.
yes,
And you reported that there's absolutely nothing that sticks out to you about being unusual.
at the time it didn't, I mean, it was pretty shocking, so, and trying to remember dates, had a lot going on that summer,
Right.
so,
So again, at that time, you had this photograph, you had looked at it, and you didn't make any notice, or you didn't let law enforcement know of anything that was suspicious at that time.
correct,
Because at that time, you didn't remember anything suspicious.
yeah, they just went fishing,
And he didn't have any, you didn't tell law enforcement, or actually you just said he didn't have any injuries to his head?
I didn't see him that day before he went fishing, but I didn't see anything when they came home,
Okay, and that's not only his head, but his whole body, nothing stuck out to you, right?
yeah,
Okay. Just a brief question about what you said on your earlier testimony. What is it that's on your wrist?
it's, Cellcom's version of Fitbit,
So it's not a Fitbit?
no.
Okay. I have no further questions, thank you.
Okay.
All right, any redirect, Attorney Kerrigan, Maris?
You were asked about phones. Did the defendant ever give you back the phone that you had loaned him?
No,
Nothing further.
Anything on that?
Just briefly. Once Mr. Burch stopped residing with you, he did make some back payments towards you, correct?
yes,
No further questions.
All right, Ms. Jackson, thank you. You may step down.
thank you.
And you are really excused. Let's have another witness.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Robert Michael Bartoli, Bourdelis.
Thank you.
Counsel, whenever you're ready.
Mr. Bordelais, can you state for the record how you are employed
Police officer for the city of Green Bay.
and what is your current assignment with the city of Green Bay?
Right now, I'm a community police officer.
Have you held other assignments with the Green Bay Police Department?
Yes.
What are those other assignments?
Patrol officer and member of the neighborhood response team.
How long have you been working with the Green Bay Police Department?
20 years in March.
And were you working with the Green Bay Police Department on the morning of June 8th of 2016?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall what was one of the first things you did that day?
About 7:30 a.m., I was dispatched to an auto theft complaint.
You know the location of the auto theft complaint?
912 South Greenwood Ave.
And when you arrived on scene, what did you do?
I spoke with complainant, Edward Jackson.
About what?
One of his vehicles was stolen overnight, apparently. Or Linda Clayton's vehicle, his fiance's vehicle.
Do you recall what type of vehicle it was?
99 Chevy Blazer.
Do you know who was allegedly driving that vehicle on a regular basis?
Ed told me the last person that drove the vehicle was his friend Steve.
And by Steve, you mean Mr. Burch?
Yes, George Stephen Burch.
Did you eventually have contact with Mr. Burch that morning?
Yes.
And do you see Mr. Burch in court here today?
Yes, I do.
Can you describe where he's seated and what he's wearing?
Seated at the defense table, wearing a blue plaid button-up shirt.
That's the record to reflect. The witnesses identify the defendant.
The record will so reflect.
Did the defendant provide information to you about the alleged vehicle theft?
Yes, he did.
And what was his statement to you at that time?
He indicated he had used the vehicle the previous night And after he was done using it, he drove home, parked it in the driveway, and must have left it unlocked with the keys in it because this morning it was missing. That morning it was missing.
Do you recall where the defendant said he had been with the vehicle the previous night?
He said he had driven to Richard Cranium's bar, which was just a few blocks down the street.
So Richard Cranium's bar, just a few blocks from the Greenwood Avenue address?
Yes.
Did you actually observe the Blazer that morning on June 8th of 2016?
No, I didn't.
Were you aware that the vehicle had been involved in other incidents?
Yes.
What two incidents, in addition to the theft complaint, was that vehicle involved in?
Well, prior to being dispatched to the theft complaint, I had noticed, I had looked up prior calls in my area from the night before and noticed that that vehicle had been involved in a vehicle fire in the 800 block of South Maple Avenue. And while investigating the auto theft complaint, I spoke with one of my lieutenants, came to the scene, and he was able to find information that the vehicle was involved in a hit-and-run accident prior to the vehicle fire the night before.
And based on that, you were following up to obtain more information from the vehicle owner and the person who may have been using the vehicle regularly?
Yes.
You know what the location of the hit and run?
400 block of Bader Street.
On the east side?
Yes.
As part of your investigation in the case, did you ask Mr. Burch to provide some information to you?
Yes, I did. He had indicated that he had been texting a friend of his that lived over on Bader Street while he was at the bar. At some point, I asked him myself, and my lieutenant asked him if he would be willing to show us the text messages between him and his friend.
And did he do that?
Yes, he gave us permission to look at his text messages. And at that point, I asked him if I could just take his phone to the department, have one of our analysts download the information off the phone just to make it easier to search through all the information.
Did you ask Mr. Burch to fill out a consent form?
Yes, I did.
And did he complete a consent form for the download of his phone?
Yes.
Mr. Bartoli, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 124. Can you identify that?
So, City of Green Bay Police Department consent to search form.
Does that form involve the consent to search the cell phone that Mr. Burch provided to you?
Yes.
In fact, that's indicated on the form.
Yes.
After you received the form and the phone, what did you do?
Well, I took a written statement from Mr. Burch, and then I stopped at Richard Cranium's bar, spoke with the owner, looked at some of the video footage from the night before. He indicated he would download the footage for me. I left him a USB stick, and then I drove to the police department to have the phone information downloaded by our analyst.
Ultimately, with respect to the hit-and-run incident, do you know how that was resolved?
The case was closed out pending further information. I wasn't able to determine if the vehicle was stolen, who'd stolen the vehicle.
And with respect to the fire, were you able to obtain any information regarding that?
I did speak with members from the fire department, but based off of their report that was completed at the time that they arrived on the scene, I wasn't able to use any of that information to solve the vehicle fire or the auto theft.
And did they actually provide information that it's possible that the equipment in the vehicle was responsible for starting the fire?
I mean, I got a copy of the report, and based off of the information that was on it, it was inconclusive as far as I could determine.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Officer Bartoli, this incident that you've been talking about, this was in June of 2016, correct?
Yes,
Do you remember the exact date? Was it June 8th?
June 8th, correct?
And when you were looking into these matters, Mr. Burch was cooperative that entire time, correct?
Yes,
He gave you consent to search his phone.
correct.
He wanted to show you the text messages that he was sending that night.
I had asked him, we asked him if he's willing to show us that information, just to see if he would cooperate with that. And he did, so.
And then I'm just going to read directly from your report on June 10th. You concluded at this time there's no information to prove Steve was the one driving the Blazer during the accident. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then right in that same sentence, and an unknown cause for the fire other than possibly started on fire due to the damage from the accident, correct?
Yes.
And then just going into specifically what you referred to from the fire department, this is that same report. You were able to glean that the ignition of the fire was determined to be the operator-passenger area of the vehicle caused by a failure of equipment or heat source with contributing factors determined to be collision, knockdown, run over, or turnover. That's correct?
That's the information that was on the fire department's report.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Any redirect? Officer Bartoli, thank you. Step down. You're excused, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take about a 15-minute morning break, and then we'll be back for the balance of the morning testimony.
All rise.
All right, let's be seated, everyone. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the state's ready to call its next witness.
State calls Kendall Danowski.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Kendall Danelski, Danelski.
Thank you.
Kendall, you may be seated if you just speak into the microphones. And then Attorney Saunders, whenever you're ready.
Can you state for the record how you're currently employed?
I'm employed by the Green Bay Police Department as their certified forensic computer examiner.
And can you describe for us some of the duties that you're responsible for in that role?
Yeah, I deal with all phones and computers that come in. I extract and analyze the data or give that data in a report so that officers, detectives, and they can go through that and analyze that data as well.
And can you outline for us some of the education you received as part of that employment?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree from Cardinal Stritch University in Milwaukee. I have that in business, and I have some computer studies courses as well. I'm a certified forensic computer examiner through IASIS, which is the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists. I also am certified with Celebrate as a logical operator and a physical analyst. I'm certified through Access Data as an Access Data certified examiner. I'm certified through Griffi with their software, the Griffi Analyze software, and I've also taken the class with NW3C as the class of Basic Data Recovery and Acquisition. And I also was trained by a CFCE with a Certified Forensic Computer Examiner who was there previously for 7 years. He trained me for about a year.
And how long have you been employed as the role that you're currently in, how long have you been doing that for?
Almost 2 years.
Okay. So looking back on June 8th of 2016, were you also employed in that capacity?
I was.
And do you recall on that date assisting Officer Bartoli with an investigation?
Yes.
And can you describe what you were asked to do on that day?
Officer Bartoli came to me and requested I extract data from a cellular phone from June 7th, 9:30 at night, extract all data from 9:30 and on.
And did you, were you handed the phone that you were to extract?
I was.
And were you told anything as to who the phone belonged to?
I was told it was a phone that belonged to George Burch.
With respect to the extraction of that phone, is that something you've done in the past previous to that occasion?
Yes, multiple times.
And that is something you have done since that occasion as well?
Yes.
Can you describe for us what generally an extraction is?
Yeah, the simplest way to put it is you basically plug the phone in and using software you select to perform an extraction.
And what sort of information does that extraction give you?
I did a physical extraction on the phone, so that's going to get call logs, text messages, web history, application data such as Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, emails.
And what sort of program did you use to perform this extraction?
Celebrate Physical Analyzer.
And is that commonly what you use in these procedures?
It is.
And you are trained to use that program as well?
Correct. Physical analyst and logical operator.
You testified earlier as to the time frame you were looking at. When you're performing an extraction, are you able to exactly narrow down the time frame?
I am not. No.
And can you describe why that is?
It's going to pull, I did a physical extraction, so it's going to do the full dump of the chip in the phone. It's going to grab everything. I cannot go through and pick and choose, I want text messages from so-and-so. I can't pick and choose certain dates or times. It's going to grab everything on that phone.
So on the extraction you performed on June 8th, you did obtain all the information from that phone?
I did.
And then what do you do once the extraction is complete?
I opened it up in the software that puts it in a readable format for me. From there, I generated an HTML report for Officer Bartoli, where I put that onto a DVD-R for him. I gave him one copy, and then I also put one copy into evidence.
So once the extraction is performed, it does print off in a PDF form, is it?
Yeah, you can pick, so you can do an HTML, PDF, a UFDR file. I chose to do the HTML so it's easy for him to go through and parse what he wanted.
Okay. And once you're done performing the extraction, what do you do with the report that's generated?
The report, I give it to Officer Bartoli, so I put a thing for him, a CDR into evidence for him, and then I also put one into evidence for long-term storage.
And what about the physical phone itself? What do you do at that point with the phone?
I return that to evidence as well.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Cross-examination.
None, thank you.
Mr. Nelson, give me a step down.
Thank you.
And this witness is excused. State can call its next witness.
State calls Raymond Lenz.
Mr. Lenz, if you come forward, over by the witness stand, and Jody will swear you in.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Raymond Lenz, Lenz.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, counsel.
Can you state for the record how you are employed?
I'm employed as a forensic scientist with the State of Wisconsin Crime Lab in Milwaukee.
Do you have a specific role with respect to your forensic scientist position?
Yes, I work in the trace evidence unit.
Can you describe what trace evidence is?
Trace evidence encounters a lot of different types of physical evidence: fibers, paint, glass, arsons, explosives, tapes, tear matches, general unknowns, things like that.
And how long have you been employed with the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory?
It'll be 26 years next month.
Can you briefly describe your educational background?
Yes, I received a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from St. Xavier College in Chicago in 1978. I then got a job with the Chicago Police Department Crime Lab, where I worked for just under 14 years. I went through a 6-month training period under the then senior members of the laboratory, and since then I've taken numerous courses and workshops to bolster my education in the field.
So I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 125. Can you identify that document?
Yes, this is a copy of my statement of qualifications.
And what is a statement of qualifications?
It lists all the different degrees I have and all the different courses that I've taken and classes that I've instructed.
And I believe you indicated that after graduating from St. Xavier University in 1978, you worked for the Chicago Police Department for 14 years?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that during the vast majority of your professional career from 1978 to present that you have worked generally in this area of forensic science?
Yes.
That's I believe coming up on 40 years. Is that accurate?
Yes.
As part of your duty as a forensic scientist with the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory, were you asked to participate in the evaluation of some evidence in a case name that the lab entitled Nicole D. Vanderheiden?
Yes.
And what was your role in terms of the items that you were asked to examine?
I was asked to examine some cables and some wire and a piece of wire that was, I believe, identified as recovered from a tank top.
And how did you receive those items at your laboratory?
The items are usually received in a sealed and unopened condition, and then they're logged in, and then they're put into a locked evidence cabinet until I take them out and work them.
And with respect to your receipt of these specific items, did you note anything unusual in terms of the way they were packaged, or did it appear to be done according to protocol?
No, everything was fine.
With respect to your opinions in this case, did you ultimately generate a report?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 126. Can you identify that document?
Yes, this is a copy of my laboratory report with my name and initials on it.
You were asked to analyze basically two separate pieces of cord or wire and then an additional piece of wire that reportedly came from a tank top. What specifically were you asked to analyze with respect to those items?
Well, just to examine them to see if there were any consistencies or inconsistencies between the small wire from the tank top and the cable that was submitted.
Basically see if are they potentially consistent, but they potentially all come from the same source.
Yes.
Mr. Lentz, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as Exhibits 23 and Exhibits 79. I would ask you to take a look at both of those items.
Yes.
Do those items appear to be the items that you were asked to analyze?
Yes, they are. There's a tag that I put my, the item designation and my initials on both pieces of cable.
That designation on the particular item, the tag, that's your tag?
Yes.
And with respect to your analysis of those devices, did you come to a conclusion?
Yes.
And what was that conclusion?
The small silver piece of wire reportedly from the tank top was consistent with the small silver wires that are in both these cables inside the sheaths of the different color wires.
And were you able to make any conclusions upon visually looking at and analyzing the two separate pieces of wire to allow you to determine whether those two pieces of wire are consistent with each other as well?
Yes, they appear to be, they both consist of four individually sheathed wires of pink, white, gray, and light green. And inside each one of those sheaths are small silver wires.
So based on your conclusion, they are consistent and could potentially come from the same source?
Yes.
Obviously, I would assume with respect to your conclusion, both as to those pieces of wire and then also the little piece of wire that you were given, it's also possible that they could have come from a different source. Is that correct?
Yes, a different source with wires that are exactly the same diameter and composition.
I apologize, your report, what's the exhibit number on that?
This is 126.
Okay. I would move for the admission of 125 and 126 into evidence.
Any objection to 125 and 126 subject to cross?
No, Your Honor.
125 and 126 are received.
And based on your training and experience, are the observations that you made and the conclusions in your report to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Lenz, you testified that the wire, I believe it was in your lab notes, would be BI7, that it came from a tank top. How do you know that?
That's how it was described in the the transmittal, when we get the evidence at the laboratory, was identified that way to us by the department.
And roughly, and I'm not looking for specifics, could you just approximate how long that wire was?
I have it in my notes if I can access them. I may have it.
Sure.
I can access my notes. I have the diameter, but not the length of it. It was a very short case.
Very short?
Yeah.
And then in terms of item N and item O, you also looked at those
Yes.
cables? And just approximately, would you say item N was right around 2 feet long?
That's possible.
And item O, that's right around 14 inches long?
Yes, that's possible.
So in total, those two wires, N and O, if you add those up, that's roughly 38 inches?
Roughly.
And you never compared those 38 inches of wire to the tank top at all, correct?
To the tank top? No.
Right. What was the outside coloring from the wire in the tank top?
There was no sheath around it. It was just a metal piece of wire.
Did you remove any sort of sheath?
No.
So it came to you, told you this is the wire from the tank top and there's no sheath around it?
That's correct.
And then what about items N and O? Do they have a sheath around them?
Yes.
And what color is that sheath?
Well, it's a black cable, and inside the black cable, there are 4 individual color sheaths of gray, white, light green, and pink. And inside each one of those are numerous silver wires of the same composition and diameter as the piece that was found.
Now, items N and O, would you describe those as flexible or inflexible? Or something in between?
They're flexible.
And part of your testimony is that while those cords or cables do seem consistent, you also are aware of other sources that those wires could come from?
Yes.
Have you compared those wires to any other wires in this case?
I did not receive any other items to compare those to on this particular case.
And what are those other types of wires that you're aware of that they could come from?
Well, I'm sure there's not, these aren't the only black wires like this. I'm sure they're mass manufactured and probably available wherever these were.
All right, our sidebar had to do with where the rest of this interrogation is going, so we'll continue with the interrogation. Attorney Schuchert.
Thank you, Judge.
Go ahead.
I would ask that these items be published for the jury.
The items again are exhibits 23 and 79. Any objection, Attorney Lassay?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. The court will allow exhibits 23 and 29 referenced by the witness to be published to the jury. And ladies and gentlemen, you can touch the cord or the wire through the plastic if you want to. Go ahead. All right, for the record, the jury has examined exhibits 23, 79, and they can be returned to the witness. Go ahead, Attorney Schuchert.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect? You may step down. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And you are excused. Attorney Lassay, do you have another witness this morning?
We don't. We did try to move some people up. As the court's aware, I think we cut short a couple of witnesses. We have folks ready to go at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. All right. Then, ladies and gentlemen, as we did one other day, we'll recess a little earlier today, but we'll have about the same amount of time for lunch. I'd ask you to return at 1 o'clock. Have a good lunch.
All rise.